the transfer portal. And this is something that's growing, this concern or excitement. But right now, it seems to be happening with a few teams. SMU is one of the biggest teams right now that's happening with, where groups of people, groups of players, even starters, we see it with the SMU secondary right now, are deciding to redshirt. If you play less than 4 games in a season and you still have a redshirt eligibility, you can choose to redshirt and then enter the transfer portal in the offseason, and it doesn't count a year of eligibility against you. You can head out to a different team, to a team that you think is a better fit for you, maybe a more competitive team. Maybe that doesn't fit for you. But regardless, it's something that we're seeing happen. On the Wednesday night game between UCF and SMU, we saw that that was a huge issue for SMU. That was a game that could have been a lot closer if the SMU secondary was involved, if they were there. But having a few players decide to enter the transfer portal just days before the game can't be fun for UCF. Now, granted, after week 4, after the, right now, probably after this week, we won't be hearing too much more about that because of the 4 games of eligibility. So it shouldn't be too much more. But this is still a concern in my mind. It could be entertaining in the long run, but right now it seems pretty concerning with SMU, Boise State with their quarterback, which we talked about earlier. We're seeing it across the board, across college football. Are you concerned about this new behavior with the transfer portal, with players leaving and redshirting in the middle of the season? Is this ruining the game of college football, Steve?
I think potentially it could. This SMU situation, my problem with it is you had a group of players, not just a single player, quit on their team. There's always going to be hurt feelings, or the reason they had the transfer portal there is because primarily because of coaching changes that happen. You're recruited by one guy and then suddenly he's gone somewhere else. Opportunities occur, whether it be due to an injury that you sustain or whatever it is. So I like the transfer portal as a practical framework, but you can't have groups of players quit on their team. You just can't have it. We talked about Bachmeyer and Boise State. The coaches, as a service, went to him before the 4th game, even though he played in the 4th game, and said, "We're going to go with the young guys. We're going to go with the freshmen." So for him to then decide, okay, I'm going to go into the transfer portal. I want to keep my year eligibility. I think that's fair because, again, we're talking, they have actually 2 freshmen at Boise State they want to look at. He knows he's not going to get a chance, to play, to start, to further his career, whether it be in Canada, the NFL, the arena leagues, whatever it would be. This is a secondary unit, and I believe it was 3 of the guys in the secondary.
Mm-hmm.
Is that correct? There was 3 of them, correct?
Yep.
All right. They quit on their team. I wouldn't say that any of those 3 guys are indispensable. I wouldn't call them. They weren't 5-star recruits. They're talented football players, but they weren't 5-star or even 4-star recruits. That becomes a selfishness, and again, it's an old school way to think of it. You don't quit on your team.
Yeah, being a being a starting defenseman for your team, that obviously hurts, and it hurts your game plan, and especially in a game like SMU UCF, which is becoming a rivalry because of the coaching on each side of the football. They're close friends, and something to keep in mind. But I agree. I think that this is in the Bachmeyer situation. It's a great situation. When it's mutual, it's fantastic. It gives the opportunity, like, hey, look, we want you to go to the right team. It's like in professional sports, you talk to an old veteran and you tell them you're deciding to move on for them. We'll help you find a championship contender to trade you to, or we'll release you in the preseason so you can find enough time to sign with the team. That's what is basically happening with the Bachmeyer situation. But with SMU, I agree. There was something going on. It's not like the head coaching changed. So maybe there's a culture issue at SMU. Maybe we're going to hear more about it. Maybe they had a right to do it. Maybe there's a lot of issues going on. But in my mind right now, if it's not mutual, like what's going on with the Bachmeyer situation, or it's not a head coaching change, because if it's a head coaching change, you're right. Could be a recruitment issue. Maybe the head coach said, I'm going to be here for a long time. if he gets fired or he leaves and a recruit or a prospect decides to go to a different school, it's hard to blame him.
Right.
You know,
Right.
it's hard to blame it. You want to be a part of a winning culture. If you don't think that winning culture is there anymore, you want to move on. The SMU situation is interesting though. Obviously, with the past of SMU, there's always that historic issues when you think of SMU of what happened in the past. You know, there's a little bit of smog still on SMU if you've been a college football fan for a long time. So right now, when you see something like this come back, it doesn't drive those concerns, but it makes you think that there could be an issue with the culture.
Yes, but now when you're looking at SMU, nobody really thought in the preseason that SMU was going to make any real noise, in their conference. So this is something that technically during spring practices, these guys could have determined saying, you know what, I don't want to waste, quote unquote, a year of eligibility in this situation. So you come out before the season starts and say, you know what, I want to go into the transfer portal. Okay, if they did that, okay, because that would kind of reinforce what you're saying. It's a culture issue. It's they don't feel comfortable with what the coaches are asking them to do or how they're asking them to play the game. That's different. You don't go a couple games into the season, your team's even more disappointing than originally thought, and say, "Oh, I'm not going to waste my time on these bums. I'm going to go in the transfer portal." That's a different conversation, and I think this is what happened at SMU. Once again, they quit on their teammates, not the coach, not the university, not the boosters. They quit on their teammates, and now those teammates have to scramble to find a way to fill those holes, and they can't because nobody can transfer in to cover them. I mean, so I think hopefully this is an outlier situation. This is not going to be a repeatable offense, but there's very few times that I've come out and thought, and you'll very rarely hear me say it on this podcast, that the transfer portal is a bad thing. What these three SMU defensive backs did, I think, is inexcusable.
As of right now, where it sits, without knowing any other details, just knowing that they did this in because of the transfer protocol rules and how they left, I'm with you. Obviously, if anything other changes, just like everybody else in the world, we're allowed to change our minds. But right now, we're recorded with saying that's how we feel, and that's okay by far. I think that this is going to be a conversation that we have that we're going to talk about for a very long time, not just with SMU, but the transfer portal as well. I'm sure there will be plenty of topics throughout the year, especially in the off season,